April 14th, 1943, 17,000 feet above the English Channel. The B-26 Marauder, pistol-packin' mama, roars through thin, freezing air, its twin Pratt & Whitney R2800 engines screaming against the wind. Inside, the crew of 7 fights turbulence, fear, and the bomber's own treacherous reputation. The pilot, First Lieutenant Charles Chuck Moran, keeps his gloved hands tight on the yoke, his voice calm but strained. "Keep her steady, boys. She likes to dance when she's nervous." Below, the sea glints like shards of glass. The Marauder vibrates violently, every bump reminding the crew why men had once called it the Flying Coffin. In the early days at MacDill Field, Florida, B-26s had crashed so often during training that the airmen's wives refused to watch takeoffs. The short, stubby wings demanded high takeoff speeds, leaving no room for error. One wrong angle, one lost engine, and the plane became a falling brick. But this morning, pistol-packin' mama isn't in Florida. She is part of the 322nd Bomb Group's daring daylight raid on a power station in IJmuiden, the Netherlands, one of the Marauder's first combat missions in Europe. The Luftwaffe had laughed at the American medium bombers that dared to cross the channel without escort. "Bogies, 2 o'clock high," the tail gunner yells. Out of the clouds, twin-engine Messerschmitt Bf-110s dive in, their cannons flashing. Tracers rip through the air like flaming needles. The Marauder shakes under impact. The co-pilot curses, scanning for altitude. But this isn't the old Marauder. Not anymore. Chuck slams the throttles forward and the plane surges. The German pilots can't believe it. The Flying Coffin is climbing, holding formation, its heavy frame defying every rumor they'd heard. The dorsal turret spits, 50 caliber fury. The Luftwaffe's laughter turns to alarm. A Bf-110 bursts into flame and tumbles from the sky. The rest break off, unwilling to waste more ammo on the bomber that refuses to die. As pistol-packin' mama crosses back over the coast, riddled but alive, Chuck exhales into his mask. Guess this coffin flies better than they thought. In the debriefing room, hours later, the ground crews are stunned. The Marauders had taken a beating, but brought nearly every crew home. Slowly, the whispers begin. Maybe this ugly bird wasn't cursed after all. But for the men who flew her, respect wouldn't come easy. Behind every mission lay a graveyard of training crashes, burned runways, and dead pilots whose mistakes had forged the survivors' skill. To master the B-26 meant fighting not just the enemy, but the machine itself. And the men who did would soon turn the Luftwaffe's laughter into disbelief. MacDill Field, Florida, spring 1942. Months before Chuck Moran's crew ever saw Europe, hundreds of young airmen were learning to fear the same name whispered around every hangar, the Flying Coffin. On the runway, Lieutenant Harold "Red" Sweeney's B-26 begins its takeoff roll. The engines howl, the nose lifts, and then disaster. The right engine sputters, the plane veers sharply left, and in seconds it slams into the palmettos beyond the airfield in a burst of orange flame. Men rush forward with extinguishers, but there's nothing left but twisted metal and silence. The Marauder's short, high-speed wings, just 65 feet across, were designed for speed, not forgiveness. Unlike the more docile B-25 Mitchell, the B-26 demanded perfection. Pilots needed to hit 150 miles per hour before takeoff. Drop below that speed, and lift simply disappeared. The result was a string of fatal crashes that drew headlines back home. The Widowmaker strikes again. Even Congress took notice. There were talks of grounding the aircraft entirely. Some instructors called it the plane that separates men from boys. Others called it murder on wings. But in the classrooms and simulators, a quiet revolution was beginning. Major Jimmy Doolittle, before his famous Tokyo raid, had insisted the Marauder could be tamed with proper training. And soon veteran instructors began teaching the new mantra: 140 or you're dead. Crews drilled endlessly on single-engine procedures, flap management, and emergency landings. They learned the quirks of her hydraulic system, her nose-heavy balance, and her temper in crosswinds. By mid-1943, something remarkable happened. The accident rate dropped. Where once the B-26 crashed every 1,000 flying hours, now it crashed every 20,000. Pilots who had survived the learning curve began to trust her. They realized the Marauder wasn't cursed. She was misunderstood. Treated right, she could outfly almost anything her size. Captain Jack Broughton, a young instructor, put it best. "She'll kill a fool quick, but if you respect her, she'll bring you home faster than any bomber alive." By the time Chuck Moran's pistol-packing mama reached England, that respect had turned to quiet confidence. The crews no longer feared the nickname Flying Coffin. They wore it like a badge. Soon, the Germans who mocked it would learn why. June 17, 1943. The English coast fades behind a formation of 36 B-26 Marauders, thundering eastward toward occupied France. The target, the heavily defended railway yards of Abbeville, a key artery feeding German divisions along the coast. Inside pistol-packing mama, Lieutenant Chuck Moran adjusts his oxygen mask. Frost creeps across the cockpit glass as the altimeter needles hover at 12,000 feet. "Formation holding, keep your eyes peeled," he mutters. The intercom crackles with background static and tension. For months, the Luftwaffe had laughed at the Marauder. Its wide fuselage, stubby wings, and awkward profile looked ungainly compared to the sleek bombers of the Reich. German intelligence dismissed it as another American experiment. Pilots called it der fliegende Sarg, the flying coffin. But now, as radar operators in France shout warnings and sirens wail along the coast, the joke starts to wear thin. Flak bursts bloom around the bombers, black flowers exploding in the morning sky. Shrapnel clatters off the fuselage. The smell of ozone and cordite fills the cabin. The bomb aimer, Sergeant Joe Lasky, leans over the Norden sight, sweat freezing on his temples. "Steady, steady, bombs away." 5,000 pounds of explosives tumble earthward. The formation banks hard for home. Below, the rail yard erupts in flame. Then they appear. Focke-Wulf 190s, climbing fast from the south. Sleek, deadly, and confident. The Luftwaffe ace leading them, Oberleutnant Karl Brenner, grins beneath his oxygen mask. He's heard the rumors about the Marauder, sluggish, clumsy, easy prey. He lines up for the kill. But as Brenner dives, his grin fades. The American bomber isn't running. Instead, it tightens formation, moving with unnerving precision. The twin 50s of the top turret blaze, cutting through the sky. One of his wingmen takes a hit, his plane spiraling down in smoke. Brenner presses in, squeezing the trigger. Tracers rake across the Marauder's fuselage, and still it holds course. The gunners return fire with deadly accuracy. Brenner breaks away, cursing. The Marauder's speed shocks him most. Even with bomb bays empty, it cruises faster than most Allied bombers, almost 285 miles per hour. The German ace realizes with a cold jolt that his prey isn't prey at all. As pistol-packing mama crosses the channel again, riddled with holes but still airborne, Moran's voice comes through the intercom, hoarse and calm. "Tell Berlin their flying coffin just came back from the grave." In the following weeks, the Marauder crews refine their tactics. They fly low-level strikes, hugging the treetops at 1,000 feet to avoid radar. They weave through flak zones with surgical precision, often bringing their bomb loads within yards of assigned targets. Losses drop sharply. Soon, Luftwaffe interceptors begin to hesitate. Commanders report the B-26 formations are too fast, too tight, too well defended. The men who once feared their own machine now watch the enemy fear it. By early 1944, the flying coffin had shed its curse. Across England's airfields, the B-26 Marauder had earned a new nickname whispered with respect: the Invincible. The transformation was nothing short of miraculous. In the first year of combat, the B-26 had been a symbol of American overconfidence. Too fast, too demanding, too dangerous. But now, under the steady hands of veteran crews and the refinements of engineers back home, the Marauder was rewriting its reputation. At Station 162 in Essex, ground crews swarmed the returning bombers. Mechanics patched bullet holes and replaced engines that had run nearly red-hot over France. One of them, Sergeant Bill Hanley, leaned on his wrench and watched pistol-packing Mama taxi in, smoke trailing from her left nacelle. "She always comes home," he muttered with pride. The statistics told the same story. By mid-1944, the Marauder had one of the lowest loss rates of any Allied bomber, fewer than one aircraft lost per 1,000 sorties. That was half the rate of the beloved B-17 Flying Fortress. Even skeptics had to admit it. The Coffin could fly circles around the myths that once haunted it. The crews had grown into legends of precision. They flew daylight missions with surgical accuracy, hitting bridges, marshalling yards, and German troop concentrations within feet of their targets. Many learned to trust their machine like a living thing. Temperamental, yes, but loyal once mastered. Captain Red Sweeney, one of the first to survive a B-26 crash at MacDill, and later a squadron leader in the 323rd Bomb Group, summed it up in his journal. "She scared the hell out of us in Florida, but up there, over France, she's the one thing we trust." By the time of D-Day, the Marauders were the spearhead of tactical bombing. Flying in tight formations over Normandy, they dropped bombs just minutes ahead of Allied troops storming the beaches. Their low-altitude accuracy shattered bridges and supply depots, cutting off German reinforcements before they reached the front. German reports from the days after June 6th were filled with disbelief. American twin-engine bombers attack with precision impossible for such speed. The same pilots who once mocked the B-26 now dreaded its shadow overhead. Luftwaffe veterans recalled watching formations of the Marauder racing across the sky, fast and fearless, each one spitting defensive fire. It wasn't just engineering that turned the tide. It was grit, discipline, and the willingness of airmen to master a plane that demanded everything. They'd taken a flawed machine and through sheer persistence transformed it into a weapon of remarkable reliability. By war's end, the numbers spoke for themselves. Over 110,000 combat missions, and a survival rate that made the B-26 one of the safest bombers of the war. The legend of the Flying Coffin had become the story of its resurrection, and when the Luftwaffe's captured pilots were shown the statistics after the war, many shook their heads in disbelief. "Impossible," one German officer muttered. "That plane should have been dead years ago." He wasn't wrong. It had been. But like the men who flew it, the Marauder had refused to stay buried. April 1945. The war in Europe is collapsing. Germany is burning from the skies. On a rain-soaked airfield in France, a formation of B-26 Marauders idles for the last time before peace. The engine's deep-throated growl rolls across the tarmac like distant thunder, a sound that once terrified rookie pilots and now fills veterans with a strange sense of nostalgia. Lieutenant Chuck Morin climbs down from pistol pack-in. Mama, for what he knows, might be the final time. The olive-drab paint is chipped, the fuselage scarred from shrapnel and time, but she ass still standing. The same aircraft that once danced on the edge of disaster over the channel. He runs a gloved hand across the name stenciled beneath the cockpit window. "Not bad for a coffin," he mutters with a grin. In the months that followed, the Marauder's story faded quietly behind the larger legends. The Flying Fortress, the Lancaster, the Mustang. But among those who flew her, the respect never died. They knew the truth. The B-26 had gone from one of the most dangerous planes in the US inventory to one of the safest, fastest, and most accurate bombers in the European theater. It was an aircraft that demanded perfection, and in doing so, it produced some of the most skilled pilots of the war. Every takeoff was a test, every landing a conversation between man and machine. It punished hesitation, but it rewarded precision. Engineers would later study its record in disbelief. Over 110,000 sorties flown, 16,000 tons of bombs dropped with unmatched accuracy, fewer than 0.5% lost to enemy action in its final year of combat. By 1945, even the Luftwaffe's surviving commanders acknowledged its transformation. General Adolf Galland, former inspector of fighters, once commented that the B-26's speed and maneuverability had made it a most unwelcome opponent. When the war ended, Hundreds of Marauders were scrapped, melted down for peacetime steel. But a few survived, resting quietly in museums or rusting in forgotten fields. Each one carried ghosts of the men who had risked everything to prove her worth. At reunions years later, aging airmen would laugh when the old nickname came up. The Flying Coffin, one would say. Yeah, she tried to kill us, but once we learned to fly her right, she saved us instead. The B-26 Marauder was never the prettiest plane, nor the most famous, but it embodied the stubborn American spirit to take something broken, dangerous, and doubted, and turn it into a weapon of victory. And for every German pilot who once mocked it, for every Allied crew who learned to fear and then master it, the truth of the Flying Coffin remains simple. She was the bomber that refused to die, and taught everyone who flew her how to truly live.